This is Patrick Russell. I'm interviewing Bob Chisolm for the first time. This interview is taking place in Dallas, Texas on October the 17th, 2014. This interview is made for the Making History Project, for a project entitled War and Peace, Memories from World War II. And Bob, why don't you first start by telling me where you were born?
Dallas, Texas, June the 23rd, 1925.
And how big was your family?
Had two brothers, older than I.
And where did you go to high school?
Forest Avenue High School in Dallas.
And what were you doing before World War II?
In school.
You were still in high school?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And you were in your senior year of high school?
No, I was in my junior year in high school.
All right. And do you remember what you were doing on Pearl Harbor Day?
I do not remember what I was doing
No?
on Pearl Harbor Day.
Okay. And how did you enter into the service?
I volunteered for the Army and was accepted in 27th of August, 1942.
And you were 17 at the time?
I was 17. I had two brothers that had gone into the service already, one in the Marines and one in the Army. And of course, a wave of patriotism had swept the country, and I think it affected practically everyone. I couldn't wait to get in, and I was a real pain to my family. And they, so much so that they decided that they would sign the papers, boost my age up, which allowed me to go in, and that's what happened.
So how old did they say you were?
19.
And what branch of the service did you volunteer for?
When I was at the recruitment station, they initially signed me to the Air Corps. And for some reason they changed that and they sent me to Camp Walters, which was the infantry training center in 1942. And I took my first 7 weeks of basic as an infantryman, and then I went to a common specialist school, which was CW radio operator. And while I was at Camp Walters, they sent a recruiting team out from Fort Benning, Georgia, paratroopers, 4 of them, dressed in their jumpsuit, and they put on an unforgettable demonstration. Jiu-jitsu and throwing each other around, kicking each other around, and I said, well, that's for me. So I signed up that day and volunteered for the Airborne, and after I completed my basic training, went to Fort Benning, Georgia for the Airborne School.
What about specifically the Airborne? When you said, that's for me, what was it? You were active in sports?
I was impressed by the appearance and the physical condition of those recruiters they sent out. I was involved in athletics in high school and thought I was in pretty good shape. I thought, well, these are the elite of the United States Army, and new, of course, and that I would like to be a part of that. I think we had probably about 17 or 18 volunteers from my company, from Camp Walters, that volunteered that day for the organization. And later, I think we had about 4 or 5 of us that actually got through and completed the training.
About
17.
Okay.
17 or 18, I don't recall the exact number, but I know that I can still remember the names of 3 or 4 of us that got through the training. And I stayed in touch with them for quite some time.
And at the time that the Airborne recruited you, do you know about how many classes already went through the Airborne?
My class was class 52, I believe.
So you were right there, pretty much right at the beginning. And how was Well, when you went through basic training, how was that? Let's just before airborne.
Basic training, physically I had no problems. Firing, I had no problems. I had spent a lot of time with my grandparents in East Texas and started hunting when I was young, so I had fired rifles and shotguns, and I had taken ROTC in high school, so it wasn't, close order drill wasn't new to me. As a matter of fact, I was made an acting corporal, and the best thing about that was I got out of the details. But basic training I thought was not easy, but wasn't in difficulty that some of the people had.
And then tell me about airborne. That took it to a whole new level.
That was a different situation.
So what was that all
Well,
about?
we got down, when we arrived at, my class arrived at the parachute school, we had a 2-week delay until we could start the official training, and that 2 weeks was spent in calisthenics 8 hours a day. And we would start off the day with a run, and I didn't really care for that. But it was very, I thought I was in good physical condition. And I found out that no, I wasn't really in good physical condition because they really put us through it. It was 8 hours a day, solid calisthenics. And I think that the instructors at that time wanted, if you weren't really up to par and had the qualifications to be airborne, they didn't want you there, and they tried to get rid of you. I think that was very deliberate. And we dropped quite a few out of my class right during that first 2 weeks. And then we went into the formal aspect of the 4 weeks of training. And we were in, because this was sort of unusual for a group to go in 2 weeks ahead of schedule. And so the time we started our formal 4 weeks of training, we were in pretty good shape then, but we would still lose some people. I remember we were doing tumbling. We were tumbling off a platform in the sawdust pit, and I'll never forget this. One of the students complained because he didn't like to get the sawdust, and the instructor says, "Get out of here." He was gone. So at least a little thing like that would, they'd move you out.
It was a weeding out process.
Oh yes, and that was, and again, that was, I think that was very deliberate that they did that. But tough training. And you had every reason to be proud of yourself once you made it through, because the classes drastically shrunk from the time that they first started the training until they completed that 4 weeks of training.
Besides the calisthenics, once you passed that weeding out process and you went into your formal training, what did they do from there?
Well, the 4 weeks of training was. Again, you had your first week was mainly, again, calisthenics, and that included a 30-foot rope climb, and they had the bowling pins, and you'd do exercise of the bowling pins, which was terrible because those things are heavy and you just drop down. And they taught tumbling, and the run was always, every day the run was there.
How far was the run?
You were running 5 miles a day then.
And you run with a pack?
No, you didn't run with anything. You just, we had coveralls and the regular shoes. We didn't get our jump boots until we got into C stage. But then we also at that time had, you got down into C stage, I believe it was C stage, and you had parachute packing, and you spent, I think it was a 4-hour period in the afternoon that you learned to pack a parachute, because at that time you packed your own parachute for your jump. These days they have riggers, and you never worry about packing a parachute. And of course you knew you were going to jump that chute that you were packing, so you were extra careful, and sometimes you'd even go back and say, well, did I do this? And sort of a slow process, but you got your chute packed. And then that ended with the, they had a 35-foot tower that you jumped from. And you lost a few men on that. Then you had the 250-foot towers that you trained on. And then from that you went into the jump stage, D stage.
When you jump from the tower, what's the process?
I'm sorry?
Well, when you're jumping from the 25-foot tower, what are you doing?
250-foot tower?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, there's 4 chutes on the tower, and they would lift you up. And when you got to the top, your time came, it'd pull you up, and that would drop you. And then the instructors are on the ground telling you what to do. And so that was your first experience with a parachute drop, just prior to the time that you actually made the drop out of an airplane. I think they adopted that from the World's Fair, or where they picked up those towers and brought them down, and they still have them down there at Fort Benning. They still use them in the training exercise, and that gave you your first feel of actually being in the air in a parachute with nothing between you and the ground but your parachute. And of course, your instructors are yelling your instructions all the time: pull to your front, slip to your left, just to get you on the ground, get you the feeling there. Very realistic training, very profitable training.
Did you ever go into the jiu-jitsu aspect that so impressed you?
Yes.
These guys roughing
Yes.
and tumbling
There was
around.
throughout the course there was an hour a day, and then they called it jiu-jitsu. Unarmed combat, they changed the name. Karate, they changed the name, but it was jiu-jitsu then, and you squared off with an opponent, and you went through all the exercises, and I can remember some of those exercises today. So it was very, very
It's
impressive.
perfection through repetition, right?
Yes.
What was your specialty in the Airborne?
Well, I had gone through the Common Specialist School at Camp Walters, which was a CW radio operator, and when I graduated from the parachute school, I went right directly into the Parachute Communication School, which is at Fort Benning, right down near the jump area. And that was a continuation of the CW training, continuous wave training, Morse code. And after I completed the school, I was retained as an instructor. And the reason for my retention as an instructor was that the 508 was in blanding training, and the 508, of course, had no communication personnel. So a group of instructors were assigned, not joined, to the 508. And then when the 508 came up, that group was transferred into the 508. And that was in January, March of '43. So we were the communication personnel, and that was my specialist. And I continued to be in communication until Normandy, and then I was given another job.
Was the communication something that you selected, or they chose that
No.
for you?
They gave you an aptitude test when you entered the service, and I guess that I scored well enough on the aptitude test that they thought I could adapt to the Morse code and be a code operator, and I did.
And you mentioned the 508. Is that the only group that you were associated with for your service in World War II?
That was the only group I was with in World War II, yes.
And you mentioned Normandy, so you deployed overseas.
I did.
All right. And how did you get overseas?
We left in December of '43, traveled by troop ship, whole regiment, sailing out of Camp Kilburn, New Jersey, and we arrived in Ireland, and were stationed in Ireland at Port Rush and Port Stewart. That was in Southern Ireland, Northern Ireland. And then we left Ireland, I believe, in March of '43, and traveled to England, to Nottingham. And then Nottingham was our base until we made our jump into Normandy.
And more training continued while you were in Nottingham?
Absolutely.
What were you doing
And,
there?
and as a matter of fact, the training continued in Ireland too. And that was during the winter months in Ireland. A lot of rain in Ireland during the winter. I don't remember it being too cold, and we were living in a little 12-man squad huts. There's 12 men in the squad, and the 12 men were in a hut. And The furnishings were rather bare. The food wasn't too good. We're on English rations, and we were out training in the mountains and had the peat bogs, and it was a pretty difficult period for training. But we did a lot of training. The thing I remember most about Ireland was that the people were so darn nice. I mean, just fantastically generous people. They didn't have much as far as rationing was in effect then, and the people didn't have much. But they would share it with American soldiers. They'd invite them into their home to come in and have Sunday dinner with them, and I was really impressed by them. I know that my mother corresponded with a family that had sort of adopted me for 20 or 30 years.
You remember the name of that family?
I don't remember the name of the family.
Do you remember the town that they lived in?
Port Rush.
And did the focus of your training change at all once you arrived overseas?
Yeah, this was advanced unit training mainly. And we actually, in Ireland, we would actually go down to the beaches and simulate beach landings. And going up, they had the little cliffs, not really steep cliffs. So we would be on the beach, and just as if we had landed there, and then we'd have to make the assault up the little cliffs and then on into the land. So that was advanced unit training. And then after we got over to England, we didn't make any training jumps in Ireland. And after we got to England, that training intensified, and we got away from the squad tactics and the platoon tactics and got into the company tactics. And in England, I believe we made 3 jumps, and terrible jumps, just scattered all over the area instead of hitting our drop zone. And that was really a forerunner of what was going to happen to us in Normandy. We didn't know it at the time, of course, but the training was very difficult at that time. Very profitable training too, I might add.
Do you know why those jumps were landing all over the place?
No, I don't. Except that the pilots that were flying the planes had to know where they were going and had to know when to release you from the planes. And if they weren't exactly on target, you missed your drop zone. And I can't remember that we ever hit our drop zone on a training jump in England. I mean, they just scattered us over the countryside. But and you want to fault somebody? Yeah, well, the pilots were at fault. They were the ones that flew the plane to the objective and gave the green light for the jump. And your jump master had nothing to do with it. And if your pilots were off the mark, you were off the mark too.
And during this training, you were still in the communications?
I was still in communications, yes.
And can you tell me a little bit about what you actually did with the communications?
Well, I was a platoon radio operator, 2nd Platoon of I Company, and the radios that I was using at the time was I believe the correct nomenclature was a PRC-6. It was a little handheld operator, and then we had it was just voice, and then we had a PRC-10 that had a greater range, and that was a voice only operated. It wasn't continuous code. And so on the exercises, I was my platoon leader's radio operator, and my platoon leader was Fran Mahan at the time, and so I was with him all the time. And when he had to contact company headquarters, then his contact with company headquarters would be me through the radio, and that was good training too, because sometimes your radio battery would be gone. You'd have to recognize that and get your battery changed, or the range would be too long, and so it was a good experience.
While you were deployed overseas, and specifically when you were in England, did you know what your eventual mission was going to be?
Not at all.
At what point did you learn?
Well, I learned what the specific mention was when they took us out to the airport and started briefing us.
That same day?
Well, our briefings, now I'm not sure if our briefings started the day that we got to the airport, because we probably were getting settled in. So, excuse me, it was a secured area, and we were told you can't leave the area. Barbed wire, and they had guards outside. Guards had order to shoot anybody trying to get out. And I think maybe the second day that they started briefing us on the mission using sand tables, which had already been set up in the briefing room, which and it was also a secure room. They excuse me. They had the sand table set up, and it showed. We knew at that time what our mission was going to be.
How many people were privy to that type of briefing?
Every man in your company.
What type of weapons were you qualified to use?
M1 rifle, Thompson submachine gun, 45 automatic, Browning automatic rifle. We had fired the mortar, 60 millimeter mortar, familiarization, and that was it as far as weapon qualification. And we had to be qualified with all those weapons.
You would have to be familiar to be able to pick up anything you need to do.
Well, of those weapons, the primary weapon that I was armed with was the M1 rifle, and I carried a 45 automatic. And but I had been qualified on the P.I.R, the light machine gun, and familiarization with 60 millimeter mortar. And yes, you had to be familiar with those weapons in the event that become necessary for you to carry one of them and fire them.
And so you participated on D-Day?
I did.
And what was your rank at that time?
My rank was private.
Right. And can you tell me what you ended up with in your military career?
Retired as a lieutenant colonel.
So tell me what happened on D-Day from your perspective.
We left the air. We loaded the planes, put the bundles on the planes, loaded the planes, and I believe it was around 10:30 in the evening that we took off on the runway, and we circled over England for maybe an hour to rendezvous with the rest of the planes in our flight, and then we took off for the French coast. And we knew the route that we were taking. We knew we were going to fly over, and I can't remember the name of the island that we were flying over as a landmark. And then from that island, Jersey Island, was it? No, I can't remember. And that after we hit that landmark, then we would turn to the right and fly over the French coast. We were scheduled to the best of my recollection, we were scheduled to go out the plane at altitude of about 800 feet. And as we passed over the Guernsey Islands, I think, as we passed over the island, we began to get a little flack. And I understood that our pilots, this was their first flight in combat. And when we got on the coast, we started getting a little heavier flack. And the pilots, for some reason, started to ascend, and they got up above the clouds, and I'd heard somebody say we were over 2,000 feet at altitude, and they just lost a sense of direction. And when we were given the green light to go out, I don't think they knew where we were or they were, because we had not had any contact with our Pathfinder team, who had gone in about an hour ahead of us to set up the Pathfinder equipment to guide us in. So we were out at a higher altitude, and when I landed, I didn't have any idea where I was at. I knew I wasn't on my drop zone that I'd been briefed on. I was in a field. The field was surrounded with hedgerows, and no one had ever told us about the hedgerows. They were just almost a barrier that you had to you couldn't find the entrance to that particular field, you just had to cut your way out. And I landed, no one around me that I could see. I took my trench knife out and cut my harness off of my chute, and sat there for a few minutes trying to hear if I could hear anyone or see anyone. I didn't. So I got through the hedgerow, walked out, and there was a road there, and I just started walking down the road.
What time did you drop out, approximately?
About 2:30
This was now June 6th. So you left on June 5th.
on June the 5th, yeah.
You jumped June 6th. What was the weather like?
Weather was pretty good. It was fair. I know the moon was out. It was fair, and I can't recall that there was much wind to interfere with the drop or to make the drop any more hazardous.
Were you concerned about the altitude?
No, because I didn't really know what altitude we were at. It was later that I learned out that I know we were climbing through the clouds because Lieutenant Mayhem, my platoon leader, number one, was already in the door, and I was in the door behind him. We knew that there was flak coming up. Hadn't hit our plane, but we could see the flak coming up, and we knew that we were above the clouds and we weren't near the altitude that we were supposed to jump. And I had later found out that we were over 2,000 feet, and we were supposed to go out to much lower altitude.
Where did you normally train at for jumping? What altitude?
I think around 1,200 feet.
And did you have a code name for your drop zone or a location where you were supposed to land?
If we did, I don't remember it, and probably did.
From where you were you able to see other planes when you were flying?
No. Once we had exited the aircraft and made the jump, I don't recall having seen any other planes. I might have heard them, and I wasn't really interested. I was more interested in trying to determine where I was at and if there were any of my company or any of my platoon around the same stick that had jumped with me. And
do you remember what your first objective was?
Well, my first objective was trying to find somebody. So I walked down the road. We each of us were carrying a landmine, about a 30-pound landmine, and we were supposed to have taken that landmine and after the landing zone and consolidate the landmine so it could be used. And I know that I just took mine out. It's a pretty heavy landmine. I just took mine out and pulled the pin out of it and laid it on the road. And thought, well, the Germans, we don't have any vehicles. The Germans come down the vehicle, they'll run into it, and that'll be fine. And then I started walking, and I heard a motorcycle coming down the road, and I knew we didn't have any motorcycles, so I got to the side of the road. And when the motorcycle came into view, it was a sidecar, and it was German. And I opened up on them with my M1, and apparently hit the driver, and they went off the side of the road. I didn't go back to look at them, and I kept walking, and I walked right into St. Mary Glace, and down to the center of town, and I saw John Steele hanging on the tower. Thought he was dead. He wasn't. He'd been wounded. And the town had already been taken by the 3rd Battalion of the 05, so I stayed with G Company of the 05 for the first 3 days until more from the regiment, the 508, came in. And then we had a large enough group that we got together and went and joined the rest of the 508.
So when you made it to St. Mary Glace, that was all by yourself?
All by myself.
You know how far along you walked?
No, and it wasn't too. It must not have been more than a mile. And other than that motorcycle, I did not see anyone or hear anything. And of course, I walked right into the G Company defensive position in St. Mary Glace. They were occupying German trenches had been dug, and so they were occupying these trenches out, I guess that was south of, just a little bit south of the town, right on the outskirts of the town. And just like normal conversation, well, who are you and what unit? And well, we're the 3rd Battalion of 505, and I said, that's fine.
Were you carrying a clicker?
You know what? If they gave us the crickets, I had one, but I don't remember it, and I don't remember ever having used it.
Did you have face paint on?
Well, we'd taken before the jump. We had these pot-bellied stoves in the hangar to keep us warm, and we just took the soot off the stove and painted our faces with it, because nothing was ever provided us to darken our faces. In those days, like they do today, they didn't have the paint or whatever.
So you improvised.
So we improvised, yeah. I know we had a steak dinner that night.
In St. Mary Glace?
No, at the airport before we jumped.
Okay.
They bought a great meal that night, steak dinner, and they brought in just cases of cigarettes. And I think I took a carton of Lucky Strikes and broke them in half and put them in my jump pocket. And man, all those cigarettes coming in, what are they going to do with them? Good treatment that night.
What happened after St. Mary Glace?
Well, we got back to the 508 and joined my company, and then we went into the action that our battalion had been assigned, and it's all. I know we made a river crossing, and the 3rd Battalion did, and we were in several firefights, and we had participated in the Lafayette Causeway, not the original assault, but after the causeway had been taken, we then passed through an attack to continue the attack, and we did so, and we took our objective. Now, this is the regiment, the battalion.
Which causeway was that?
The Lafayette Causeway.
That little bridge.
Oh yeah, just a well. Now this
was important.
Yeah, this is a complete causeway across the river there, and the units that made the initial attack really took some heavy casualties.
That's where the Iron Mike is today, right?
Yeah. And then our regular missions continued, and on the 23rd of June, they had a combat patrol going out. And Lieutenant Harn, 2nd Lieutenant, platoon leader of the 1st Platoon of Company I-508, was the patrol leader. And we were to make contact with the enemy to try to determine where their positions were. And I was a point man on the patrol with Bill Hughes from my company, and we were going down a road. The road made a bend, and while we were walking on the road, I'll never figure out. It's not something I'd ever done later.
Where was this again?
Pardon?
Where was this?
And it was. I cannot remember it was in not too far from St. Mary Glace, I know, but I can't remember exactly the names of the terrain around there. I think we were getting ready to make an attack on the 4th of July, and we were trying to find out before we did this where the enemy positions were. So that was the reason for the combat patrol rather than reconnaissance patrol. And I remember it's Hill 131 or Hill. It was one of the hills there, and I can't recall it. But as we came to that bend in the road, a machine gun opened up and got me in my right shoulder, knocked me in the ditch, and then got me in the back of the head. And Bill Hughes, my good friend, jumped in the ditch on the other side of the road, And he kept yelling, "Bob, Bob, you all right?" And every time he'd yell, "Bob, you all right?" that machine gun up again. It was just clipping, just low enough, it just got the top of my head. And he said, and they had an armored car there, and the armored car backed out because I guess they thought they were going to be attacked by a greater force. Machine gun was there, and Bill jumped up and had a Thompson submachine gun, and I had a B.A.R. And he knocked out that machine gun nest with that Thompson submachine gun. And we got up and went back down the road and ran into the rest of the patrol. And we had accomplished our mission. We found what the enemy position was. And so we went back to the regiment, and I went into the battalion first aid station. And our regimental surgeon looked at my wounds and dressed the one on my arm and also on the back of my head. And they evacuated me back to a medical station, and then from there on a boat over to England, and in the hospital in England. And I stayed in the hospital until end of August. And they were going to send me to an infantry unit, and no, I'm not going to an infantry unit. And I left and went back to the 508. I knew where they were, and I think they carried me AWOL at the hospital for a few days, but I was back with the unit. That was the important thing. So that was and the 23rd of June happened to be my 19th birthday.
That's when you got hit.
That's when I got hit.
That's when you got your first combat infantry badge?
No, that's when I got my first Purple Heart.
Okay. Well, how did you get your first combat infantry badge?
Well, everyone that had participated in the Normandy campaign and that otherwise qualified got the combat infantry badge. Now, I don't know the exact date that was published in orders, or I know it was after we back out of Normandy. And I do have probably the general order number in which that was awarded.
Now you have the great distinction of being one of the few to have 3 combat infantry
I do
badges,
have, yes.
correct?
That's the combat infantry badge with 2 stars.
And that came from your experience in
Korea and Vietnam.
In Vietnam and in Normandy.
In Normandy.
And there's less than, what was the number? 325 or 345? You know better than me. The history of the U.S. Army, it's very few.
I'm not sure. It was less than 400 that's been awarded nationwide. And of course, I guess there'll be no additional stars awarded for it. That 3rd award is about the highest you get. And I think there's now, I believe I heard a figure, there's 135 of us, maybe still alive, that was awarded the 3 badges.
And you mentioned Mr. Hughes. You still
Bill Hughes.
Yeah, you still keep in contact with him, or?
No, Bill passed away. 10 or 12 years ago. I was in contact with his son, and right after we maintained contact, but right after he passed away, I wrote his son and told him that his dad was a real hero, although he hadn't been recognized for what he did. He would have probably gotten as a minimum a Bronze Star. But back in those days, and especially in an airborne unit, when somebody did something like that, you thought, well, what the heck, that's what they're supposed to do. And many of our troopers participated in action that they should have been given an award, but they just never were.
Now, you mentioned that you trained to be a radio operator, and now you were a point man on that patrol. Yeah. How did that happen?
Well, my platoon leader thought that I would be a better rifleman in the rifle squad than a radio operator, so he had to got him a new operator, and I went into a squad and was an assistant squad leader. And from that point on, I stayed in the squad and in the platoon. and I didn't get back into communications at all.
When did you receive your first promotion?
Well, now I had been promoted before. At Camp McCall. I was promoted to a T5, which was a technician 5th grade, and then I was promoted to a T4. And this is a real story. And at Camp McCall, we had a battalion latrine. And on payday, a group of us got in. It didn't happen ever payday. A group of us got in a latrine. We stayed up all night shooting dice, drinking beer, and we left it a mess. And our battalion commander was the officer of the day, staff officer of the day. And when he came down inspecting the area, he saw that mess in the latrine, and he called a battalion formation and said, okay, any of you that participated in that mess in that latrine last night, I want you to be honorable and step forward. And we had some first sergeants that had been in there that night. And so being a little bit dumb at that time, a few of us stepped forward, and Colonel Mendez, finest commander I ever served under, said, well, all of you are now privates. So I just got promoted to T4 and I got demoted. And so my next promotion came in Holland, and I was a corporal. And then in the Bulge, I was promoted to sergeant. And then I was returned to the States for hospitalization, and promoted to the staff sergeant and tech sergeant. I was an instructor again at the parachute school. And in 1951, I was given a direct appointment as a second lieutenant. My grade was master sergeant at the time. And they had a provision at that time that if you were a master sergeant and recommended by a general officer, they could give you a direct appointment as an officer, and you didn't have to go to OCS or be an ROTC graduate to get it. And my senior advisor out in California at the time, we were advising reserve units, said, did you ever think about going to OCS? And I said, no, I never gave it a thought, Colonel. He said, well, you know, we can probably get you an appointment as a direct appointment as a second lieutenant. And I talked over with my wife, and she said, well, you know, what? So I appeared, General Wiedemeyer, 6th Army Commander, recommended me. I appeared before the board, and I was given a reserve commission as a second lieutenant, called to active duty in 1952.
So when you returned back to your buddies in August of 44, after your stay, you recouped, where'd you go next?
Well, we were training. We were at, let's see, we were at Nottingham still. Yeah, we were at Nottingham still. And we were training, normal training that the unit does. And then we were alerted for Operation Market Garden. And that was September the 17th. We were taken out to the airfield and put in a secure compound. Again, you can't go out, and then briefed with the sand tables. And we loaded the planes. That was Sunday, the September the 17th. Beautiful day. And we made the jump into Holland Market Garden. I think we went out of the plane about 2:17 in the afternoon, a Sunday afternoon. Perfect landing on the DZs, nothing like Normandy. And it was just a fantastic combat jump. My platoon had been given a mission for a recon patrol into Nijmegen, and a Second Lieutenant Bush was the assistant platoon leader, and he was the patrol leader. And It was Joe Petrie, myself, and Bill Hughes again on the patrol. And our orders were, as a recon patrol, that we were to go into Nijmegen to see how close we could get to the bridge. And we, without contacting any Germans, we went into Nijmegen, got right up to the approaches to the bridge, and there was a circle right before the bridge, and in the middle of the circle was an 88 with several Germans there. And so all we were supposed to do was see how close we could get and make a report back to regiment. And Lieutenant Bush made the report back to the regiment. G Company was on their way up. Captain Waugh was the G Company commander. And we met them, we told them what we had seen, and then we went back and joined the company because our mission for that day had been completed.
And at that point, what was your rank?
At that point, I was a corporal.
And what were you thinking when you saw an 88?
Didn't give it. We knew that the 88 was a very dangerous weapon. Had a lot of capability. You know, anti-aircraft, direct fire, very high velocity round, and it was just that. Well, hey, here's the enemy. They got an 88. Anybody that's coming up here is going to have to contend with it, or they can get on the bridge.
And it was pointing down, right?
Yeah, it was pointing right back down the street.
And it was there to either deal with infantry or tanks.
Anything coming up, probably more anti-tank than anything else. But it was just a common defensive procedure that you would expect there. The bridge had to be guarded, and this was part of the detachment there that was guarding the bridge.
And so, when you did Operation Market Garden, that was your second combat jump?
That was my second combat jump.
And was there any, do you feel any different jumping the second time?
Well, it was a beautiful jump. We landed on our LZ, just so greatly different from the Normandy jump, which was at night, and they just spread us over. We didn't know where we was at, and when we jumped in Market Garden, we knew exactly where we were at. We were right on our DZ. We knew exactly what we did, what we had to do. My plane had been hit, and Lieutenant Wicks in front of me, and I don't know to this day what happened to him. I'd been hit in the face and in the body with a flak. And on the way out, they had a Dutch hospital in Bergendal. And Lieutenant Bush says, let's stop here right quick, and went in and they put a couple of stitches in my forehead, patched me up, and we went right on our mission without any great delay. But it was just a real nice jump, or combat jump. Probably up to that time, probably one of the best that had been made. You know, it had Africa and Sicily and Italy, and they had the same problem getting the troops all spread out. And of course, going into Sicily, some of them had been shot down by our Navy. And we took the Germans completely by surprise. Also, we knew that our intelligence knew, and the Dutch underground knew, that up at Arnhem, that the Germans were refitting their Panthers up there. And of course, historically, later you found out that Montgomery ignored that information, both from American intelligence and Dutch underground. And so that was a bridge too far, you know, Arnhem.
Did you participate in any other activity in Operation Market Garden after your reconnaissance?
Yes, we had, our company had a mission of setting up a roadblock in Beek. Now, Beek was right on the German border, and part of the town was in Germany and part of the town was in Holland. And our objective was to initially go down and set up a roadblock reinforced by engineers and 87 millimeter anti-tank gun. We got down and put our first roadblock in. On the way down, we had we were delayed by some armored cars, and we got the armored cars out, two of them, and set up a roadblock. And the Germans launched a small counterattack, and the troops that were there had to pull back, and then we were given the orders to attack again, go down, attack again, get back down in town, and set up a roadblock. We did so, and we had an engineer platoon with us, and the 187 millimeter tank gun, and the Germans then launched a major attack on our positions, and we had two lieutenants with us. One of them, Lieutenant Tinker, I believe his name was killed. Tree burst had hit, and it had killed him in the foxhole with a radio operator. And the other officer, and I just would say probably not for publication, he was last seen leaving, going up a hill without his weapon. And I took command of the operation. And when I found out that the Germans were attacking with tanks, armor, and a good-sized force, and I pulled our force back to the high ground just outside of Beek, and set up defensive position there just to try to stop them going any further. And I talked to Colonel Mendez, our battalion commander, on the phone, and he says, how large a force do you think that is, Chisolm? And I said, well, Colonel, it looks to me like there's at least a battalion of armor and maybe a battalion of infantry coming at us. And I think I had 187 men or 87 men, real small unit. He says, well, you maintain your position, and we're going to try to attack. And he attacked with two companies, and they couldn't get in. He finally committed over a battalion to get back in there. And later we wondered, well, why are they so hot to get back in this little town? Well, we were occupying Germany. We were the first American unit to occupy German territory. And I guess the Germans didn't want anybody on their homeland, and they were determined to get us out of there. But we finally took the town back, and then we held it. Beek, Holland.
And what happened after that?
Well, we continued. We had operations. We would attack some positions, battalion size attack, and our company's objective, and we managed to take those without any problem. We executed patrols, and pretty much, of course, the British and our number was getting wiped out, and we maintained a route for them, the ones that could get out and get back. And so that pretty much ended the operation. We stayed in Holland for I think 62 days, and we finally pulled back and we were then in Camp Chisolm in France. Pulled back and went back into Camp Chisolm.
What was your next operation?
The next operation was the Bulge.
And how did that all start for you?
Well, we got the alert order. Let me think now. It was December 17th, I believe, 16th. We got the alert order that the Germans had attacked and made some deep penetrations, and the 82nd Airborne was going to be committed. And that was an overnight alert. They sent these big trucks down, big semi trucks, open trailers, and they loaded us into the trucks, and we were immediately dispatched into Belgium. And we had no winter clothing. We were actually well prepared because of the fact that we had our arms and ammunition. But we got off the trucks in Belgium, I think around Stavelot, and just immediately went into contact with the Germans fighting. And that continued right up. I know Christmas Day we had orders to pull back and straighten out our lines. I think General Gavin called it a street. The 82nd never retreated. I think he called it a strategic withdrawal or straighten the lines out. And he would take exception if anybody said the 82nd ever retreated, as did we all. And I know that we had pulled back on the day after Christmas. They brought up food to us, and we didn't have any utensils to eat out, and we take our steel helmet off, and they'd put the turkey and dressing, everything in the steel helmet, so we was glad to get it. And then we were given the order to counterattack, and we had the Ridge Tir de Mont was the high ground that we had left behind when we withdrew, and so we had to take that high ground again. And the 3rd Battalion had the objective of leading the attack. G Company and H Company, and I Company was in reserve. And we got up to the ridge, close to the ridge. We had orders to attack through G and H Company because they were hitting a lot of casualties. And that was on the 7th of January. And a tree burst got me on the 7th of January, and tore all the muscle out of my left leg and it hit me in the neck. And freezing cold. I had never been more miserable in my life as I was in the Battle of Budge, and everybody else would say the same thing. Just we had no equipment, we had no winter clothing at all, no winter boots or anything, and so I was wounded, and was out most of the day. The wily our medic came by and gave me a shot of morphine, and he left as he was required to, left the morphine there, let him know that I had a shot of morphine. And he put a bandage on my neck, but he didn't know that I was wounded in my leg. And they later said that my blood congealed and froze because of the real cold weather, and had it not, I'd probably bled to death because I was out there for several hours before they got me back to aid station. So they got me back to aid station, and they found the wound, and they evacuated me to the 8th General Hospital in Paris. And that was a $100 wound. Got me back to the States. So
$1 million wound.
$1 million wound, yeah, right. And I was sent back to the William Beaumont Hospital in El Paso. That was the plastic surgery center of the military then. These young men that had been in tanks and been burned, just horribly disfigured, and they were taking a skin growth out from under the arm and putting it in the ear or their nose and getting that skin growing, and then they would clip it off and then reform their nose and skin, and it just had an awful lot of them in there. But they did the work on my face, and after my surgery, they'd give me a 7-day leave to go home. My home was in Dallas. So I'd take the 7-day leave and go home and then come back, and they'd do some more surgery on my face. And I went down to, when they had finished with the surgery there, they sent me to Brooke Army Hospital in San Antonio for recuperation. And they lost my records as they were shipping me back to the States. And on my leave, I'd go home. My brothers would be there. My friends would be there. They'd be out drawing their $22 and drinking beer. And I thought, geez, what a heck of a life that is. So when the 508 was going to stay in Europe as Eisenhower's honor guard, and Colonel Mendez at the time was temporarily in command, and I wrote Colonel Mendez a letter and said if I could come back to the 508, I would re-enlist in the Army. And he wrote the Army commander and said, re-enlist Sergeant Chisolm for assignment back to the 508. And they did so, and I went back to the 508 and was with them in Germany for the occupation. And I had gotten married to my childhood sweetheart, and
What's her name?
Margaret Browning. When I was in the second grade, she was in the first grade. I was 7, she was 6, and that was just a long time love affair. But so I went back to the 508. General Eisenhower's Honor Guard, tech sergeant then, and Margaret and other wives were the first wives allowed to come to Germany during the first dependents allowed to come to Germany to live during the occupation. And at that time, the 508 was in Heddernheim, right outside of Frankfurt. Heddernheim had been quarters for the German Air Force. Nice little homes there. And when the 508, before the 508 moved in, the military government gave them, the German Air Force people, orders, take what you can take with you in one day and get out of those buildings. And so the 508 was then billeted in there, real nice billets. And when our wives came over, we also had quarters there. So I stayed with the 508 until they were sent back to the States for deactivation. And at the time they gave us, those of us that had our wives there, we were given an opportunity to remain there in a new unit. And they had a signal group there, and my signal background or communication background, they agreed to take those of us that were communication qualified. 3118 Signal Group, I think it was the company, the battalion. So I then got back into Signal. We had just an interesting point. I was a tech sergeant, and at the time, the officers that had served, that got out of the service, they were allowed to come back in as master sergeants. And so that pretty much froze the rank of master sergeant for enlisted men. And we were putting on a signal corps display in Heidelberg for the command, the Army command, and, showing what we had in case something come up and they needed all the types of communication. And General Matejka was the Europe Command Signal Officer, Major General. At that time, General Taylor was Chief of Staff, and he was there, and he came down to make a visit and make an inspection. It's just a courtesy thing. And when he came up and started talking to me, he says, "I see you're Airborne, Sergeant." I said, "Yes, sir." And he asked what unit I was in and so forth, and I told him. He says, "Well, why are you still a tech sergeant?" I said, "Well, sir, promotions for enlisted men are frozen now." And he turned to General Matejka, and he said, "Matejka, can't you get this sergeant promoted?" He left. 2 weeks later, my commanding officer received a letter that said, "Send Sergeant Chisolm up to Heidelberg, and he's going to appear before a board." And I went to Heidelberg. They briefed me and said, "You're going to appear before a board of officers for consideration of promotion." My goodness, what is happening? And so I appeared before the board, and 2 weeks later, I got orders promoting me to permanent master sergeant, signed by Clarence R. Hubner, commanding general, European Command, and I still got that certificate and those promotion orders in a frame.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome at the time. I thought, boy, just right place at the right time. So that was just an interesting point in my career.
While you were there in the occupation, what was Frankfurt like?
Pretty much destroyed, for one thing. And you have to give the Germans credit. Very industrious. They would start out with a pile of rubbish, and they would start moving this pile of rubbish back here, and the good stuff they were taking out, and they were building a new structure there. Really impressive that they would do something like this. But we had, of course, it was occupation, and there were restrictions. You weren't supposed to. Of course, I was married, but you weren't supposed. Our soldiers were not supposed to fraternize with the German girls, which they did. And but it was under military government control, occupied, and I know that we would get in the 508. We would get the word that a shot had been fired in some part of town, and we would immediately dispatch a unit to that area and conduct a search. And we would often, when we were making a search, find a weapon. And if we did, we'd arrest the whole family and take them in. But we had very few of those incidents. I know we had one or two where we had to go out and conduct the searches. Just another interesting point that the 508 was in Frankfurt, and of course they had the military company, military police detachments, and you know, the troopers are they're proud for one thing, and there's also always some kind of altercation going on. So the commanding general of the Frankfurt subpost decided, well, the best way to put a stop to this, we'll let the 508 have a shoot patrol, and we'll put a shoot patrol, as a paratrooper with a CP on him like an MP, we'll put a shoot patrol with HMP, and then something happens, they'll be together there, and they can take it. And that worked very well. So that's just an interesting sidelight.
Did you ever have occasion to interact with any of the German civilians?
Well, we came in contact with them, like we had a maid, German maid, that took care of our quarters because I was married, and other than that, I didn't have too much contact with the Germans then.
During your campaign from Normandy, Market Garden, the Ardennes, did you ever have any interaction with any civilians from those countries at all?
In Holland we did. The Dutch people were just fantastic. You couldn't find any people more appreciative they were than the Dutch that we were there, and the contact with them was just a social contact, and then of course with the military, with the underground, we had contact with them, but that was a very pleasant experience, and to this day I think the Dutch people are more friendly toward America than maybe any other European country.
Do you recall any specific interactions with anybody from Holland?
No.
What about with any of the German soldiers? Do you ever have any interaction with them?
No.
And what kind of awards did you receive during World War II?
I received Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, 3 Purple Hearts, Combat Infantry Badge, and then the normal campaign medals, European Campaign Medal, American, and then the foreign decorations that regiment received, and individuals received, the French for Guerre, Belgian for Guerre, and the Dutch Orange Lantern, and that was it.
And what was the Bronze Star for?
Bronze Star was for meritorious service. Purple Heart for wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Legion of Merit for the action in Holland.
Was there a specific action or event that led to the Bronze Star?
No. The fact that you were in the infantry and been awarded the Combat Infantry Badge entitled you to the Bronze Star for meritorious service.
Have you ever heard of the phrase that war is hell?
Yes, I have.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with that.
How so? What was your experience that you would agree with that statement?
Well, the experience that leads me to say that more than anything is the fact that those soldiers that you served with and became, you're not blood brothers, but you really are become brothers. There is no closer relationship than serving with a man in combat. And when you see them killed, it's just devastating. You don't ever forget it. And there's nothing more horrible than to lose so many of your friends in a conflict that was it worth it? Yeah, I guess it was. If we hadn't gone into the conflict, we might be living in an entirely different world now. But it's just something that you'll never ever forget. I can very distinctly remember each action in which my closest friends were killed, and then when I wasn't there, like in Normandy, after I was hospitalized, I came back and I walked in the orderly room, and I see a company clerk sitting there, and I sign in, and I say, introduce myself. Don't know him, he's new replacement. And I said, well, where's the first sergeant? He says, first sergeant was killed in Normandy. Then you get down into your company, and you're looking around, and you don't recognize a lot of people. And you start asking about them, and you find out that they were killed too. So there's nothing good about a war. An armed conflict certainly is necessary at times. If we hadn't fought and defeated Germany and Japan, where would we be today? We don't know. And of course, I think World War II was justified. I didn't like the way that Korea went. We fought under the United Nations flag, and we should have won that war. We're still at war with Korea. I mean, that's a truce. We're still at war with Korea, and I think it's one of the greater threats we have in the country today, because those people, when they said, well, they kept talking, well, we're going to attack South, and nobody believed them, and they did. And this guy now, well, they hadn't seen him for a while. This guy now says, well, we're developing an atomic bomb. We're going to drop the bomb on you, and you'll never know when the guy will do it. That's the type of person he is. But I think it affects most everybody. It's some more than others. It's PTSD now that they've got. In World War II, they called it shell shock. I remember Baldwin, Texas, out on a roadblock, and all at once he went berserk. And in my company, and I was, my God, what has happened to him? And he leaves, and you never see him again. You never heard him again. And but there was more reluctance in World War II. If something like that happened to you, you might end up getting court-martialed. And I know that he must have been had some disciplinary action against him. So in World War II, the people were very reluctant to let on that they were bothered by something, although it would happen in very isolated cases. And then in Korea, there was a little less stigma attached to it. And they at that time, they weren't court-martialing a person for going into shell shock, or the term that they used. And of course, in Vietnam with Agent Orange and everything, it began to be worse. And then right now, practically everybody that's coming back, these kids are going for maybe 6 deployments, 7 deployments. And you think, my God, how terrible that is, and their family, and you see one of our young members in our Benavides chapter, Omar Hernandez, 6 deployments, wife and young kid, now they're divorced. And so the situation changes as the years go on. But yeah, war is hell.
Did you ever have personal experiences of madness or terror or fear, just uncontrollable emotions?
Well, I don't think I ever had uncontrollable fear. I certainly have had fear. When you're, well, I think the best example I can give you is after having been wounded 3 times in World War II, and then I'm going to Korea, and I'm an infantry officer, and I get into my unit for the first time, and I'm thinking, how am I going to react? Now, this is the first time I've been back in combat since World War II, and at the end of World War II, after being wounded 3 times, I wondered if I could make it if I went back in again, and so I had to find out. So the first thing I did was volunteer for a patrol, in a combat patrol at night. I said, well, I'm going to find out right now if I'm going to be okay, and sure enough, I was. Did it bother me? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'm a heck of a lot more alert now than I was then, and just about every little thing. You know, I'm well trained. I'm an experienced combat man, and I know what to look for, and I would know how to react if something happened. But I had to prove to myself that I was going to be all right, and I found out, yes, I'm going to be all right.
In your opinion, you didn't feel that too many people could exhibit that type of a problem during the service of World War II because of the fear of being court-martialed. What about
ostracized?
What about afterwards? What about when they got home?
I don't know. I don't.
Because nowadays you hear a lot of the returned soldiers coming home and having problems.
Yes, they are.
Do you think that your generation had a similar type of adjustment period or problems?
I think the big difference in World War II, you went into the service, you knew you were going to be in there until the war ended. And if you were, let's say, you're a paratrooper, and you're in combat, and you know that you're going to stay there till either you're killed or you're wounded to seriously enough that you're evacuated back to the States, and it's not a matter of you being here for 6 months, going back to the States, coming back for 6 months, and so it didn't have the same effect on the soldiers then that was apparent that it has on them now, because now a man can go into the Middle East and spend a year there and come back and go back into the Middle East again and spend another year there, and then go 6 months else and spend this continuous deployment in the combat situation, back to his family, back into a combat situation again. So it's an entirely different aspect between World War II and then the situation in the Middle East today. I don't recall having conversation with any of my friends, and I stayed in the military and a lot of friends and maintained contact with my friends in the 82nd Airborne Division Association, and I don't recall having discussed this at any length with anyone shortly after World War II. Now, here, or in the reunions that we have, you get a little more information on how the people felt back then. They're able to ventilate their emotions a little more, because in World War II, there's no way that a man is going to admit that he's being shell shocked or he's being fearful of going in and fighting the enemy again. Whether he was or he wasn't, it just didn't happen.
What about today for you? How did you feel when you got back?
Well, of course, I'm a veteran of 3 wars, and I came out of Korea without any problem, and came out of Vietnam. I came out of Vietnam bitter. I came out of Vietnam bitter because I thought that our politicians and a part of our American public really gave that war to the enemy, and I still think that way today. I think had the American public not been demonstrating out in Hyde-Ashbury and other places, and that if our politicians had decided to commit forces to win that action, we could have done so. And I think that the North Vietnamese the North Vietnamese commander said that you had us beat then. And it's in his book. He said, you had us beat then, but when we saw how the Americans were continuing to demonstrate, we said, oh well, we'll win this war. But now I feel very bad for our young people. I don't know that these people in the Middle East, and especially in Afghanistan, where they have the tribes, they've been fighting this for 1,000 years, and they're probably going to continue to fight it. And we're just not prepared to commit the forces necessary to win the war, even if it's winnable. And again, it's because of the tribal factions that's involved. My personal opinion is that we made a serious mistake when we pulled our forces out of Iran and or out of Iraq. I think we're making the same mistake in Afghanistan if we decide to pull all our forces out there, and I don't know that we will, although the president has said that we will. But it's really a mess.
When you said earlier that being a combat veteran of 3 wars, that you're more alert to things and more attuned from all your training, hyper vigilant, did you bring any of that kind of habits back home? You know, I've interviewed some veterans that have told me about, you know, they look on the ground for landmines, and even to this day, 70 years later. Have you noticed any of those type of things?
No. My wife might have noticed some after, of course, we were married right after World War II, and so she was a veteran widow for Korea and Vietnam. But if she did, she never let on about it. But I think the greatest asset a military man has is his wife. They're just wonderful people, and no one gives a military wife the credit that they're due. But you get you never get used to being in combat and be under the threat of death. You have to learn to live with it, especially if you're in a leadership position.
Did you have to make any type of adjustments when you got back?
I don't know. I don't recall that that there were any adjustments necessary. I just picked up and kept on living, and of course, in the military, doing the things that I was supposed to do. When I was sent to Korea, I went over there as a second lieutenant, and right after we were scheduled to go initially into the 187th in Japan. There were a plane load of us, second lieutenant. I think we had 8 nurses and 1 captain on. And then pork chop happened in Korea with the 7th Division, and so they diverted all of us lieutenants into the 7th Division. And when Colonel Eddie Dolman was the commanding officer, and when I got there, a second lieutenant, and I guess Colonel Dolman looked at my record, and he needed a company commander, and so he gave me a company as a second lieutenant, and you know, it's quite an accomplishment, I guess. Anyway, I kept the company until my company fought the last major action of the Korean War on Westview and Dale, Chinese attack, and I had a battlefield promotion to first lieutenant. It's pretty standard. I retired medically after 29 and a half years, medical retirement.
On the opposite side of war being held, there's also, you know, the famous book War and Peace.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have a peace side, and you've been, you know, deployed 3 different wars, and they all were different.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have experiences as a military man seeing in all the chaos of war some sort of a peace, whether it was a civilian going out of their way to help a soldier, colleague of yours going out of his way to help somebody, civilian or comrade, something that was out of the ordinary, something memorable that you thought, wow, this is like really unusual, but it's actually something good happening during war. Did you ever see anything like that?
Well, the military pretty much takes care of their own, and if an incident happens in the military, let's say that an individual is killed and they're on active duty and in the military, they immediately move to take care of that family and make sure that that family is taken care of. That was true back in World War II to the extent that they're able to, because that was a mobilization of the country, and right up through the present conflict, that they're gonna take care of their own. The veterans organizations today are really involved in taking care of the veterans returning from this conflict. They are devoting an awful lot of time to this, and it's been helpful. We get in our organization at Fort Bliss, the Benevides National Airborne chapter, we're very active in getting together with the active duty soldiers, and we will have some kind of a social affair, and we'll invite the units to come out and join us, and we know the problems that they're having, and I think that it is very helpful to them. They're sort of reclusive, you know. They won't just talk to anybody, but if they're talking to a veteran that they know that's experienced the same thing that they have, they begin to open up, and it gives them a good feeling, and it gives us a good feeling to be able to be in contact with these young men, and we do an awful lot of that now. The one problem we have is more difficult in some cases to establish a rapport with the Vietnam veterans than it is with the present day veterans. We got some Vietnam veterans that's just, you know, still out of it today. They're just reluctant to talk about their experience, and if we can get them in and sort of establish a rapport with them. We've had some good results with some of them. We've had some that haven't talked for years, and they come into the organization, and there we are, and we've experienced the same thing that they have, and now we're talking. So all at once they said, well, you know, maybe this is a good thing, and they'll come back again, and we've had some good results at. But the veterans organizations are doing a pretty good job. But I think all in all, the military is going to take care of their own, and they do a good job of it.
What organizations do you specifically work with today?
Well, I'm with the 82nd Airborne Division Association, the Untitled Chapter in El Paso, and I'm with the Vietnam Veterans of America in El Paso, and I'm with the Purple Heart Chapter in El Paso. I'm with the Disabled American Veterans in El Paso, and I have held offices of all of these. I guess I probably spend more time with the Airborne chapter than I do with the others, but I'm active in all the organizations, and I hold office in all those, with the exception of the DAV. I hold office today in those organizations too. And I'm a widower, so it gives me something to do. I sort of enjoy it. It keeps me active. I'm 89 years old.
In 2013, did you receive some sort of an award, like named an All-American or something?
I was named the 82nd Airborne Division All-American of the Year.
How did that make you feel?
Wonderful. What an honor. Geez, they got 40,000 people to choose from. And why me? I don't know. Quite a surprise when I was called and said, you're going to be named the 82nd Airborne Division Association Man of the Year. And I said, my goodness. So I went up to brag and was presented the award, and I was awed by it.
And when you were there, did you have occasion to interact with some of the younger military guys of today?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one young man and his wife, in particular, that impressed me. He lost his leg in Iraq, and he said, first he said, sir, I'd like to have my picture taken with you. And I said, well, I'd just be honored to have my picture taken with you. And then I had my picture taken with him. He said, could you just sit down with me and my wife for a little while and talk to us? Absolutely. And it was quite interesting. But I had a number of those young men come up and congratulate me, but this one really touched me, and I guess it probably helped him and did him some good. I sat down and talked to him, and we had about a 30-minute conversation.
If you could reflect on one memorable moment from World War II, your most memorable moment, what would it be? And it could be anything. It could be a funny moment,
Well,
sad moment.
the one moment that stays in my memory more than anything else is being shot on my 19th birthday.
On that road, which you didn't know why you were walking down it.
While I'm walking down the road in enemy territory, the whole damn platoon, the whole patrol is walking down the road with Kelso Horn as a patrol leader. You don't ever do that. I mean, of course we're supposed to make contact with the enemy. We sure did.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished, yeah. But that, and people sometimes ask me, what, just like you did. I said, geez, it's got to be that on my 19th birthday I was shot the first time.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you would like to add that I didn't ask?
No, I think you've been pretty thorough, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
And final question: is there anything you would like to tell future generations at all? Any piece of advice from somebody from your background, your experience? You have a lot to offer. What would you tell them?
I would say, learn the history of your country. That is very important, that you know where we've been and how we got there, and that it is so important, because if you don't know the history of your country, you're just missing out on a great opportunity. Respect your country and your Constitution and all people in your country, without regard to race, creed, or religion. I think if you can do that, not only will you be a success, your country will be a success.
And that's something worth fighting for.
That's what we've been fighting for.
And when you ended your military career, what were you doing? You were what?
I went into ranching. I'd bought 2 ranches in East Texas, one 121 acres and one 1,827 acres. I had spent a lot of time with my grandparents in that part of the country and had roots there, and I thoroughly enjoyed it while I was doing it. Just a lot of hard work and not too profitable, but very, very satisfying. My wife enjoyed it, and we were among a lot of relatives. And hey, it was just just something that kept you occupied. And if you had something on your mind, you wouldn't have to worry about it. You got to worry about feeding those cows.
Mm-hmm.
But I had an opportunity to go into business with my cousin, and he wanted me to take over his El Paso operation. This was the manufacturing of industrial wiping cloths and the clothing business, and I incorporated another business while I was there. Had over 100 employees, and it was a good business, and I since sold that. And now my time is occupied by my veterans organizations. I'm still staying active.
Mm-hmm.
To some extent, it keeps you young.
Certainly. Sounds like a life well lived. I'd like to thank you for your service and everything you've done for our country.
And I thank you for the opportunity of having talked to you.
And thanks for sitting here and answering the questions. Thanks.